So Guy, thank you very much for taking the time to speak with us. This is the first bit of a video industry insight we do. The purpose of this is just to have a chat and discuss about how we see the industry, how we see things moving forward, what are the challenges, what are the opportunities. But before we dive into this, could you please tell us a few words about you?
Yeah, sure. So I'm currently the CEO of GreenSolver, which is a company I founded about 10 years ago as part of a investment fund, and as such, so we're managing a number of assets across Europe and performing technical services. My background is more a financial guy, so I'm Canadian. I became a Canadian chartered accountant. That's how I landed in Europe 30 years ago, and renewables about 12 years ago.
And tell us a bit more. How did you started engaging into renewables? What got you into the sector?
It was interesting. I mean, it's back in 2007, so quite early. I guess at the time where it was an inflection point in the industry where the industry was starting to move into more professionalization. So I was coming out of like blue chip companies and basically I ended up working in an investment fund, which was one of the earliest investment funds in wind, and they were looking for somebody with probably a varnish, a professional approach that we didn't, there wasn't much of at the time in the industry. So from my perspective, I think I was lucky because I got in the right time. It's been really exciting, and we did so many things, over that period. So it was just.
But do you believe that for people that like us who work in the renewables, is it just luck, or there is an underlining, let's say, vision and purpose on working in renewables?
No, of course. I mean, it was then also an entrepreneurial journey, because I joined in, took some shares and then moving in there, and it was a risk because the whole industry was basically very nascent. Today it's the same if you look at mobility, the storage, which are the kind of renewables a little bit outside. I mean, these are these new industries which are very exciting, interesting to get into. So it's not just luck. I mean, obviously it's wanting to take that luck and seize it.
So going into that entrepreneurial journey, tell us perhaps a couple of highlights or a couple of important points through that entrepreneurial journey that you went through in the last, I would say, 10 years or so.
Well, I mean, obviously, I told you, I joined early 2007. So one of the most critical and difficult times for us was the 2008 crisis. We were it really took a very big personal toll, and we had a lot of issues because we had just raised the largest financing in the French business. It was a 120 million financing on a portfolio financing. First time it was done in France. We raised it with a large French bank, signed it in June, and we're going to get the first drawdowns early October. Lehman happened in the middle of September, and then we, from that time until January, our time was sheer hell. It was just very, very difficult. And so it really taught us a lesson in terms of all these risks when you make investments. And you say, risk can happen, but it's okay. We can assume risk, whatever. But when risk actually happens and you have to deal with it, it's not always easy.
It's not always easy. Yeah. But you took a company like GreenSolver from a startup essentially, or a less established business, and now it's an established business in asset management and advisory, pretty much within all the mainstream markets in Europe. So what was perhaps the key steps in that journey of taking GreenSolver from where it started to here?
Yeah, well, when we started GreenSolver, basically the business of third-party asset management didn't exist. You know, we were at the very beginning because we were managing it for the very first funds that you know were investing and needed that expertise, that technical expertise and financial expertise that you know they didn't have in-house. So basically, you know, along that way we learned a number of things, and I think we pretty much defined our path as we went along. And I think the challenge there has been really to keep growing to the level of professionalization that the industry has gone through. You know, from you know, I always tell stories. I feel like an old geek on this, but you know, the stories when I saw customers buying assets in 10 years ago, which probably 10, 11 years ago that didn't have wind measurements, you know, on the wind side. You go today, it's like, unbelievable. You know, no noise studies. Environmental was basically on the back of a sheet of paper. I mean, all these things that was then obviously are unthinkable now, and we grew along that. You know, that and our vision has been to try to lead that as much as possible. The ISO 55001 is an example. You know, we've been the first one in the French market, period. You know, to be certified on that, and that's been very important for us because it reflects our push, our drive for the to be you know the leader in quality and professionalism.
Right. Now, going deeper perhaps into the renewables, how do you see the renewable market developing over the next 10 years in Europe?
10 years is a long horizon.
Two years. let's take a shorter version.
Yeah, so 2 years. I mean, because it's been moving. The last 2 years it's moved tremendously. I think that I talked of inflection points before. I mean, we've reached an inflection point where renewable has become mainstream. What always surprised me was the fact that you know the utilities were very much absent from well, not absent, but they were not leading the renewable space. They were investing a little bit to see how it played, and you know our space is quite bizarre because electricity, and you have a lot of these IPPs doing renewables business. And we're like, who are those guys? You know, developers who just basically can actually set up their own thing, which is a bit strange. And now we see, because the cost of the LCOE has now really hit the right spot where it makes no sense to develop anything else but the renewables. And now it's the market is starting to flip. The utilities are definitely investing heavily into the renewables, gobbling up these IPPs, which will eventually disappear. But also, what's even more interesting is like even bigger than the utilities. It's like the big fish eating, the other fish who gets eaten by another big fish. Now you got the oil companies coming in because they need, they own 50% of the world energy market, and that their market is shrinking, so they need to move to electricity. And electricity today, almost 100% of the new installation of electricity is renewables. So they're moving big time into renewables, and that movement really accelerated, in the last, especially 2018, started somewhat in 2017. So what's going to happen over the next 2 years? Definitely we will see, again, continued consolidation at increased pace. I think, which means it's a big shift in the whole market, where less players, IPPs being doubled up. So therefore, that will affect the whole industry around it. So services industry will consolidate very much. The manufacturers also will size and increase in size. We see the Chinese are finally coming. It's like winter is coming now. The Chinese are coming, and they're here, and they're growing, and they're big and they're large. So we see all this consolidation. So it becomes a man's game. I think now it's real serious. It's professional, and also it's it's great for us consumers as a whole, because it means electricity prices will go down. The governments don't need to be as much present, so it also becomes a merchant business, and that's what we'll see more and more. So I don't expect the governments to drop their support within the next 2 years, but definitely that support will go down, and that's in the end it's good for the industry, because it means that we can expand without constraints really driven by government regulations because they're the one giving the money. If they don't give the money, then it's a fair game for everybody.
And you're mentioning a couple of things here. One is scale, which becomes apparent. The second thing was about consolidation. Do you think that the consolidation will follow the trend as well in the service sector, as in the asset ownership sector?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I believe in the end, the breed that will disappear will be the IPPs because they have no space in the market in the end, and you know they're owned by shareholders, and shareholders will be better off to sell rather than keep on. So something that will give them the same return. Everybody else will be there, but there will be there will always be a need for service providers because there will be debt. No matter what the debt is, the debt could be a bond, it could be green bonds as well. So different ways of financing, but you still need experts that come in and validates that. So they'll be there. There'll be probably less of these small guys and more structured to handle the requests of the large owners. There will still be financiers. Now there may be different breeds as well because again the large utilities, the large the oil majors, they finance their balance sheet, they finance the assets in different ways. They can refinance. They don't necessarily need 100% ownership of the assets, and sometimes they get cheaper cost of capital. So it remains. I mean the renewables which is basically it's a electricity generation business is heavily capitalistic, and therefore you still need financial instruments and financials to be there and support it. So the whole industry, it will move about. It will probably get bigger in terms of who plays into it. It'll be pretty much the same factions, I guess, for lack of a better word.
Excellent. So, do you see though markets? I mean, you've discussed about the governments bringing down perhaps their support on the industry, and the industry becoming much more merchant. So we've seen markets like Spain, like Italy, perhaps other markets, France, even the UK in 6 months or 9 months from now, that there's a second wave perhaps of development, which is primarily based on PPAs and merchant risk.
Yeah.
So what is your opinion about these markets? Are they as hot as people think, or should we approach them with a degree of cautious?
I think they're very hot. They're definitely they're very hot right now. Not everywhere. Clearly, Sweden, Spain are the hottest. I'm in a way surprised that it's not as hot as we expected in the UK, but I think that it will actually come, and that's great, because it opens up and it opens up a number of potential developments and everything. As I said, it moves into the market direction. My big warning to our customers is always like you need to be very careful when you invest into these merchant or PPA projects. Is the long-term view. I think the whole industry has been investing over time. We saw the length of the business plan was moved from 20 to 25 to 30 years, which is fine. I mean, from a technical standpoint, the assets are there and can be there for 25, 30 years. But then it's a matter of, so will your resource be there? Yeah, no problem. We can model that. But then, what revenue are you going to get from it? And in the world of PPAs, where you see more and more capacity being built on merchant, then there will be the question after your 10-year PPA, what market will be there for your 10-year-old asset if the market keeps building up new assets, and how big is that going to be? So is that going to work for another 10 years? But then what after the 20 years, and then you still have 20 years of newer assets, more efficient, producing more, cheaper. Okay, you may be pretty much amortized, but at what price will you really be selling? And there the assumptions are not the same as what we have today. So it's I think we need to be very careful on how to how long or what view we should take as investors if you go over a long period.
What do you think would be the key differentiators on the service provision, either for asset managers or for O&Ms, both in the wind and the solar sector? Do you think that this new wave of digitalization, of bringing in new digital tools, will actually help people drive down costs and become more efficient, or we're still, a bit left behind on that, and it's just an academic discussion at the moment that there is a lot of hype, but there's not actually something happening yet.
Yeah. Well, no, there's a lot of stuff happening, clearly. Then the real question, there's a few points. One, I think I see a lot of more interest over the last year, I guess, in operations. Customers, investors realize that the operation is start. In the end, it is the name of the game when you start having a few assets, and it's not that easy. Even solar assets, which everybody think, it's easy. Well, actually, it isn't. There's a lot of things need to be done, needs to be thought through, and if you are to bring your assets to 30-year life, there's a lot of things to do. So there's this overall realization. Then there's a lot of even basic stuff that needs to be done. And needs to be done properly, and what I do hope with all this also is to get more flexibility, more professionalism. Don't forget on the wind side. It's very difficult to find good wind technicians, to keep them, for the O&M, and so there is whole models of how they structure today, which doesn't work. The spares management is a mess, across Europe and on any turbine manufacturer. So there's a lot to do just on the basics even today. Then there's the next wave, which we've been talking about for a few years, and there's a lot of startups, a lot of initiatives, which are about AI, about big data, using that, doing predictive, improving your what's going to do, sensor management, and all this is very good. It's very positive. It's definitely going in the right direction and will improve. We're in a slow moving in that sense. Our trends we're in long cycles, So I think, and since we have long maintenance contracts now, the impetus for change isn't great. You still have 5-6 years, your revenue's there, so you're improving overall, but how fast you do it is not as much. So I think yes, we will see. These things. I think AI is definitely is a big plus, in terms of helping understand the downtimes and the causes of the stoppages and how to improve. But it needs to come. I think we need to start by walking before we run. There's still a lot to do on the basics.
Right. Okay. And last question, if you may. Tell us a bit about what the future holds for Greensolver. How do you see yourself in the next 2 to 5 years?
Same thing. I'll probably look at 2 years and look at 5. In this industry. But clearly, I think we do need to keep on adjusting and adapting to the market. For us, one thing we've held steady. We like to innovate. We like to be at the forefront of our business, which is again by being really professional, bringing in new ways of looking at things and doing things. This year we just launched the asset optimization concept, which is something in the end that people were kind of discussing without really putting a right name onto it. I guess in the industry, I think given our technical and financial expertise, we're able actually to really not only conceptualize it, but then also bring it to a customer in a full frame. And I think that's a step forward. It's also an evolution, and also taken from our ISO 55001 approach, which actually makes full sense onto it. So that's one way. I think also from a customers, we need to adapt to the market, which means also different financial customers, different services to these oil majors, these IPPs, these utilities, which still need external advice and technical expert advice as we provide. So it's more adapting to these factors. And maybe a final one is what I hope within 2-3 years, it'll be for us to also be present in Germany, I guess, which is for us it's you mentioned it's the one market, one major European market we're not active apart from the advisory business, but I think we'd like to be able to manage assets and be more present in the
So
market.
expand a bit more.
Expand a bit more, yeah, of course.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for the discussion. I appreciate it, and all the best with your plans with Green Silver.
Thank you.